My name is Naimo Ali, otherwise known as Nemo. I am a child protection investigation supervisor here at Hennepin County Health and Human Services Department in Minnesota. And I'm here today to present my ARP on Project Kinship supports. As Arlene stated, I have experienced my own journey through the child protection process as a youth in Minnesota, and that has really fueled my passion for making change, system change, and producing positive outcomes for other families who walk through that same journey. So next, I'll present my presentation overview. And at first, we are going to focus on my action research project, identifying that. We will then go through the legal and statutory mandates, and then continue on with the implementation results and discussion phase, as well as next steps for my project. And then we will go ahead and talk about my experience as an MPLD fellow and my takeaway. So my action research project was focused on staff, ensuring that staff are able to increase awareness and knowledge about how to effectively support kinship placement options. And I considered the following factors as items that would help support their decision making. One of them being routine placement evaluations, second being interdisciplinary team consults, third being consultation with foster care licensing team, and then also assessing the needs of the children along with the evaluation of the prospective foster parents' capacity and willingness to meet those needs. So our policy introductions that are affecting kinship placement options is our federal mandate. So our federal mandate gives preference to adult relative over non-related caregiver when determining placement of a child. As long as that adult relative meets the state requirements, they should be placed there. Minnesota goes well and above that by also issuing guidance on placement decisions. Minnesota statute says that within 30 days after the removal, a child's relatives should get notice and should be identified within 30 days. So issuing that guidance just makes even a clear emphasis that placing with relatives is very significant for us. Next slide, we will identify what does Minnesota consider a relative to be. So Minnesota considers the legal parent and the guardian to be a relative. It considers a person related to the child by blood, marriage, or adoption to be a relative. It also considers the adoptive parents, legal custodians of the child's siblings to be a relative, as well as any individual who is an important friend with whom the child resides with or has had significant contact with. So also considering those family friends. So kinship is considered a relative in Minnesota. So we will go ahead and look into Minnesota. So Minnesota is the state supervised county administered child welfare program. We have 87 counties, 2 Native American Indian Initiative tribes, and we also utilize the differential response system. So for us, when we look at Hennepin County being one of the largest counties in Minnesota, we see that we have 1.2 million residents that we serve. We are resource rich. We take advantage of our geographic proximity to community programs, as well as public transportation system, as well as the multicultural resources that's offered. We will go ahead and look at the demographics of children in Hennepin County, as well as the racial breakdown of children in foster care in Hennepin County. So we see on this slide that there is disproportionality of African American children 21% of the county's child protection system, but 50%, but 40% of them are in care. So we see that there is definite disproportionality happening there. And as you can see, the African American child population is fuchsia colored. We also see underrepresentation for Caucasian children. They represent 57% of the child population in Hennepin County, but they also represent only 18% of children in foster care in Hennepin County. So there is a huge difference there. We also see a rise in disproportionality amongst multiracial children. So next slide, we will explain permanency timelines for children. We see on here that there is an increase as the years go by from 2017 to 2019, where children are being released or being offered guardianship with relative foster parents or related foster parents. We also see on here that the permanency timeline, Hennepin County has done a good job in terms of the years within the 12-month permanency timeline. We dropped just a little bit in 2019. The federal standard was 40.5%. We just rounded it up to 41%. But in 2019, we got 40%, which is just a little below the federal standard. But otherwise, in 2018, 2017, we've been doing pretty good. We see on here that permanency timelines within, if we compare the 12 months to 13 months and 24 months and onward, that we achieve permanency rates at a higher rate within that 12 to 23 months. Here, there's a representation of our county's placement in terms of placing children with relatives versus non-relative. We see on here that there's a slight decrease as the years go by for unrelated foster parents. So placements with unrelated foster parents in 2018, it was at 32%. In 2020, it was at 23%. And then there's also at the same time a slight increase for placing children with relatives. We can see on here for relative placements in 2018, it was at 30%. But in 2020, we shot up to 37%. So there's an increase while at the same time a decrease for non-relative placements. So why the attention, right? Because as a county, we're doing pretty well from what I've shown you so far. But our focus at Hennepin County is not just meeting standards, but it's also about stability, self-sufficiency, well-being for the residents that we serve. So one of the factors that I'm really passionate about is relative placements. And the reason why I'm particularly focused on this is that relative placements have been known to buffer parental separation. It provides ongoing contact with familiar relatives for the children. It preserves their cultural and customs and increases siblings remaining together. So let's take a deeper dive into the background data. So here we have placement stability. With placement stability, you can see that from 2017, 2018, 2019, we've actually decreased in number of moves for children. And we see that in 2019, we had 3.6 average moves of children in care. The state standard is 4.12 or less. So we've actually met that standard there. But if we look at foster care reentry rates, we shot up from 2017 to 2019. Our reentry rate is at 17.3%. The state standard would like us to be at 8.3 or less. So we are trying to meet that standard there. Also, when we look at maltreatment in foster care, Victimization rates should be less than 8.5. We're still high with 11.6. So really our focus now is reducing the foster care reentry rate and also reducing the maltreatment in foster care. So those two are our focus points that we have here. So Joseph Crumbly, who is a therapist as well as a training consultant for the Annie Casey Foundation, really opened my eyes when he talked about kinship placements. So he indicated that kinship placements have their own unique complexities. So he talks about shifts in family relationships, right? So let's say a grandma gets placement of her grandchild. That grandchild is now a sibling to his aunts and uncles and is a sibling to his mom all of a sudden. So because the changes in the genogram has changed, their relationship has also changed, and that can drive a shift and realignments of some sorts. As a child protection worker, it's very keen to keep an eye on these things, and as a foster care licensor, it's also something to keep an eye on, as well as unstated family rules. Each family has loyalty amongst each other. There's a bond there. And sometimes it could feel as though you're choosing between believing in a government agency over believing what your mom or your grandma tells you is right or wrong. He also talks about intergenerational trauma. So families have trauma that they've endured, whether it's historical trauma, separation trauma, or poverty and social economic disenfranchisements. So things like that are to keep an eye on, as well as licensing requirements. When you, as a relative, become a caretaker for a relative of yours, a lot of times you don't plan your life around being a caretaker for your child, and it just happens one day. So licensing requirements are something new and something to adjust to for families. So next up, we will talk about my research implementation strategy. So I wanted to create a survey. I wanted to hear not just the staff, but I really wanted to hear the voices of the relative foster parents. I wanted to know, what do they need? What do they want? What could be a benefit for them? And how do they receive our agency's work and service delivery? So my focus was really on the foster parents. I also wanted to complete randomized case study reviews and review our current placement supports and share those results with the department. And then next up, we'll go through what the survey entailed. So the survey was sent to 442 relative foster parents through an email blast. The survey was a combination of both a needs assessment, what relative foster parents needed, as well as a satisfaction survey. So how do they perceive our agency service delivery? My target was focused on foster parents who had an open case with child protection, who were actively providing foster care. And we didn't mind if they were licensed through a tribal agency, licensed through a private agency, or if they were through an ICPC agreement. So next up, we'll talk about what we've learned from the survey. So the survey indicated that 50% of the respondents had children who lived in the home prior to them becoming a foster parent. You can also look at it the other way, that 50% of them did not know the children that they received to have placement of. Also, 53% of the respondents did not participate in the development of their child's out-of-home case plan. 66% of the respondents reported that they did not receive financial assistance to purchase beds of any of the children that were placed. And 37% reported that they did not need financial assistance. Meanwhile, 70% reported needing assistance but not having it. 71% reported that they have attended all of the court hearings. Meanwhile, 69% reported that they are satisfied to very satisfied with being a foster parent at Hennepin County. The survey also indicated some things that we can improve upon to better our foster parents' experience. Some of them indicated that they needed the workers' communication to improve. In Hennepin County, we have multiple workers working with one family, working on one case, focused on one child. And the foster parents indicated that they would like those workers to communicate instead of the foster parent communicating with the guardian ad litem, then communicating with the child services worker, then communicating with the child protection worker, then communicating with the foster care licensor. So they indicated that they would appreciate the workers involved in the family to be able to have those communication amongst themselves, as well as communication with them about things that they needed to do. Foster parents also indicated that they would like information on healing the entire family, not just services for their foster child or their relative child, but also the family as a whole. The same for the mother who's involved in the case, the same for the dad who's involved in the case, the whole family receiving healing and help. The foster parents also indicated that before removing a child for allegations, that they would appreciate to be able to retain care of their relative children until the allegations unfold and a determination is made, instead of quickly removing children and then possibly the allegations being unfounded and then the children returning to their relative caretakers. The foster parents also indicated needing assistance with housing resources. As a relative foster parent, sometimes, again, you do not expect your relative needing foster care. So a lot of times you might end up with one relative child, then another relative child comes, then your living situation that seemed to be working well before the children got placed, all of a sudden now is inadequate. So receiving help and support in terms of getting housing and resources surrounding that. Our foster parents also indicated that they would appreciate us looking into direct deposit instead of paper vouchers for them to complete their reimbursement. Instead of potentially receiving interruptions in their reimbursement, they would appreciate it to be done via direct deposit and to be able to continually, without interruptions, receive the resources that they need to be able to meet the needs of their family. So next up, we'll talk about the case reviews. So I wanted to know, how do staff support and enhance success of relative placements? How are decisions being evaluated and assessed? And how are the 10 best interest factors being used in case planning? So in order to do that, I thought, why don't I randomly look at cases that are actively open right now and look specifically at relative foster homes, whether it be a kinship foster home or whether it be a pre-adoptive foster home, and exclude cases where children are in foster care because of developmental disabilities, medical needs, or extended foster care, or there's a tribal jurisdiction that has the placement authority over the child. So we looked at these randomized cases, and the next slide will indicate some of the outcomes that we found. So along with the survey, as you will recall, a majority of foster parents did not receive their child's or their foster child's case plan, and they did not participate in the development of that case plan. So our randomized case study reviews of active cases also indicated the same phenomenon. So it also indicated that consultation with licensors was also low. So the next slide, it says that the cases reviewed indicated consultation with foster care licenses are needed. Only 53% of the cases involved a consultation with a licensor to assist in placement decisions. The foster parent's participation in receiving a copy of the child's auto home case plan was needed. 73% of the parents did not have input on the child's case plan. There were also 16 cases that were licensed by other agencies, such as private agencies or tribal agencies, that we did not have access to look into their licensing agencies' files. So at Hennepin County, if we can't find information on the child's case, we can always look at our foster parents' case and see if there was information disclosed there, because the randomized case study reviews were just looking at Hennepin County. We weren't able to look at those licensing agencies to see if information was discussed there. So next up, we'll talk about placement supports in Hennepin County. So Hennepin County offers a variety of supports for kinship providers. So we offer an onboarding curriculum tailored to meet the needs of kinship placements, such as maintaining boundaries with birth parents. Um, we offer them from the beginning to be able to explain our licensing requirements, what to do in certain cases. As a kinship or a relative provider, you will find yourself um, making decisions solely on behalf of the child. And as a relative and as a foster parent, sometimes consultation with the department or the agency that placed the child should be done. So for a lot of foster parents, it's just reorienting them to consult with the agency, let the agency know, so that way they could make decisions. We also offer a kinship social worker who's assigned to every child who's placed in out of home care. That kinship worker is specifically designed to identify and search for relatives. We offer a kinship foster care licensing phone line. So, in case a foster parent needs to call for an emergency, they have somebody that they can get a hold of and they can contact. We also offer various training opportunities, but we offer a pre service training hours that are less than our traditional foster parents. So our foster parents complete 12 hours of training to be licensed. As a relative and kin foster parent, you will only need to complete 6 hours of pre-service training to be licensed. And then that whole year, you'll have the opportunity to um, learn the trainings that you need to get those hours. We offer emergency payment authorizations for beds, fire extinguishers that are needed for licensing. We also offer childcare scholarships and incentives for foster parents who are working or going to school full time. We offer various support groups. We also offer a we also offer emergency initial clothing allowance for our foster parents. And we offer a opportunity for relative foster parents to be able to become a non-relative care provider. So as a relative foster parent, you have the ability to encourage other families. You have the ability to give back to the community. And we want to keep our foster parents going. So if they have a purpose and they want to continue on providing care, we give them that option to be able to do so. We give them a new application and we change their status, but they can continue on and become a non-relative care provider. We also offer opportunities for our foster parents to evaluate and rate the agency. We also allow child protection workers or case managers to be able to evaluate our foster parents' performance. So it's really a collaboration and a partnership. So our study's limitation. So of course, we had a small population size, so that affected our study. Our survey was only in English, so that could have affected other foster parents who speak uh, multiple other languages aside from English. Our survey was also done online, so that could have been a barrier for other foster parents who, are able to do things the old fashioned paper copy way. So improvements for the next study would be, you know, translate the survey in other spoken languages. And then also, our survey was targeted to relative or kin foster parents. So maybe looking at the survey to be developed for non relative foster parents because their voices also matter. Also, creating a focus group for the survey respondents so that way we're able to have this flow of conversation and dialogue to see what their thoughts were. So my next steps for this project is, to continue advocating for relative and kin providers to participate in the development of their foster child's case plans, for them to receive a copy and for them to sign that plan, to increase our agency's understanding of kinship foster parents and the challenges that they face. Also, to support our recruitment efforts for this year. So, my MPLD experience, as Arlene said, I learned to operate from a place of hope and not fear. And accepting that statement, it took a lot. It wasn't as easy as saying it. Boosting my confidence as a leader, coming from the challenges that I faced, being a leader was going to be the last thing on my list. But I've received an opportunity to do so, and I'm very grateful for it. Also, not being afraid of research, not being afraid of empirical evidence, culturally affirming practice, being surrounded by like minded professionals who really want to see change happen. So, those were my takeaways. So, when I think of kinship placements, I think of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. So, Mr. Rogers was quoted as saying, "We live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes." So, I don't think I don't think Mr. Rogers was alone in his thinking, as we are all here today for our shared responsibility to create a better society. I like to shout out my heroes who saw my need and responded. I like to thank my foster mother, Doris Jean Poole. I like to thank my coworker, Susan Drecker, who at a NAC conference saw the flyer and thought of me. I like to thank my former supervisor, Margaret Bedore, who in her retirement wanted me to go through this program and wanted me to fully embrace my qualities as a leader. So much so that she connected me with her supervisor, Melissa Sherlock, to be my mentor. And I would also like to thank Melissa Sherlock for showing me that as a leader, some things are better said, some things are better done than said. Through observing her, I've realized that her commitment, her never ending commitment, is so profound that I myself now know not to cancel meetings and to maintain my calendar. I'd like to thank my current supervisor, Helen Martin, for seeing my growth and growing pains as a new supervisor. I'd like to thank personally Arlene for seeing hope in me and accepting me into this program as I was already rejected once. So thank you, Arlene, for accepting me into MPLD 2020. And next up, next up, I have my references and my contact information, and I'll be here to take any questions.